Hi again. I'm Mirage. Welcome to our roundtable where we're talking about disability in Hollywood and just the life of a performer in this industry, performer, any other type of component in this industry. I'm Mirage. I am a Black woman with white small micro braids. I'm sitting at a desk, and behind me is a brick wall, but it's not real. But there's a brick wall behind me. And I'm going to go ahead and get this started by introducing our moderator, Spencer. Spencer, can you say your last name again? Because
Yeah, it's all good. Frankenberger, and I always have this, which I think I said last week too. If I had been hyphenated, I would have been Frankenberger Argyropoulos, which would have been just a lot to handle. I think so I was only one of the two, but you have to throw my Greek heritage in there somewhere.
I think that's what threw me off. I think that once you said the last part, it just wiped out the first part, and it was just gone. Like you said, Frankenberger, and then like, was that?
It said Frankenberger or Frankie Burger, depending on if you're my mom or my dad.
And I am both. So yeah, cool. I'm going to hand it over to you. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful discussion. I'm excited to continue it.
Thank you. Hey, everyone. I'm Spencer. I'm your moderator for this evening. Just to recap what I look like, I am olive skinned because I'm Greek. I got that little bit of olive oil glow to me. I have a little bit of stubble on my beard. I have short black hair. I'm wearing black glasses with a little bit of red trim on the inside, and I have not a fluorescent. It's like a floral purple shirt, but there's no flowers on it. It's just like the floral, like I don't know, like a pastel. That's what it is, pastel purple. And I've got a beige cream colored solid wall behind me. We did a lot of disability talk last week, but there's just so much that we need to talk about as far as advocacy and accessibility. So I have some panelists again with us tonight that I'm going to introduce who were great last week, and I wanted to bring them back to kind of continue the conversation and add some more to it. So this week, I'm going to start by introducing people in backwards alphabetical order by first name, and I'm going to start with Jen.
Hi, I am Jen Kretschmer. I am a producer, writer, actor, and streaming tabletop creative. I am sitting in a black chair. I have straight red hair and red lipstick, and behind me is kind of a fairy forest looking backdrop. And I have a microphone as well in front of me.
Great.
And I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I'm an ambulatory wheelchair user, and I have a number of associated conditions as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Jen. We'll see you in a bit. I also forgot that everyone on this panel has a disability, and I forgot to introduce my disability. I have Coates disease, so I'm a high partial, high contrast, blind low vision, performer, creative, and all of that. So our panelists are welcome to disclose, but they don't have to. But everyone on this panel tonight has a disability, and so I'm excited to have them all here. Next, I'm going to introduce Eileen. Eileen is next. Hello, hello.
Okay, so I'm white, Irish American female with blonde hair and blue eyes. I'm wearing a blue and white tie-dyed tank top and a silver necklace, and I've got a staircase behind me, and I'm sitting in well, you can't see what I'm sitting in, so I won't describe it.
He's also wearing white earbuds.
White earbuds, and I'm drinking a glass of wine because I was just having dinner when we started.
What kind of wine? Red, white? What kind of wine?
It's a red wine.
Great, I love it.
And let's see. Okay, I had a spinal cord injury as a child. I'm what some people like to say spinal cord injury walker at this stage in my life. I am also a cancer survivor, and I think that's it. I'm an actress first, writer, producer, used to do casting, and I just started directing. I went through the CBS program for up-and-coming entertainment industry leaders, and I went in for directing. And I like to write and create. I do create shows.
Great. I love it. And you have a Facebook group, right? Or a page?
I do. I have a page we started about 10 years ago. And it was when I was tired of the industry telling us that there were no trained actors with real disabilities. So I started a page called Trained Actors with Real Disabilities to let the world know they do exist, and here they are. And if you reach out to us with your casting notices and all that, we've compiled a big group of people, and at least now we can post casting notices. We do try to promote all the work of any people with disabilities who are out there working in the world. Like if someone's on a show, we promote their shows. If they let us know, they can send their posts to us and they send their casting notices. And when they've got tricky casting to do, like they can't find who fits the roles they're doing, we try to help them find them. And we reach out to everyone to do that. Everyone that all the groups we're connected to. And I'm on the National SAG-AFTRA Performers with Disabilities Committee. I've been on that for years. So I have that network. And the guy who actually runs the Trained Actors with Real Disabilities page is a guy named Vince Staskell, who is a man with CP, who's probably, I'm guessing, about 70 now. And he has been an advocate since he was a small child on all those, when they used to do those shows where they sort of raised money showing how crippled the kids were and all that. Like we have pictures of him from his childhood. He has been advocating to change the world to be more inclusive and accepting for his entire life. And he's not in the entertainment industry, but he came on to run that page because we don't have a lot. We don't have a lot of help with it, and it's a big job to do everything that needs to be done. So we're always looking for volunteers to help with the page as well. And we ask everyone to submit their stuff with descriptions and stuff, because he just simply can't do it all by himself. He's
Sure.
a disabled man who's doing most of the work himself, and I help as much as I can. But we're always looking for people to jump in to make sure it's inclusive for everyone. And but that's what it started from, was our industry always claiming we had no trained actors with real disabilities. And I resented that, and I decided to counter it.
That myth has been busted, and it's been busted for you.
Busted.
Still believe that it's a myth. Great. Thank you so much. We'll see you in a bit. And I know that Mirage just posted the Facebook group into the chat. So
Thank you.
if you're interested, feel free to reach out. And we'll see you in a bit.
Thanks.
Next, I want to present Diana. Diana is going to pop in here now.
Hi, hello. I'm Diana Elizabeth Jordan. I'm an African American woman. I have a longest, shortest natural hairstyle. I'm wearing a pink top with a blue jumper. I'm sitting in the living dining room at my parents' house. So as I'm here for the weekend, so I have some stuff. Something my mother was like a doll, and a candle with a golden bowl behind me. That's sitting on a dresser. I am an actor, a solo artist, a theater and filmmaker, and a disability inclusion artist. I also am a teaching artist. I love to teach. I've been in the industry about 30 plus years. I'm also served on the SAG, National Performers with Disabilities Committee. I've been an activist and an advocate just for the representation of intersectional images of disability in the media. And also studied to get into directing. I love directing. So, and I'm creating my own content. I have a couple solo shows and a company called the Rainbow Butterfly Cafe, which is an edutainment production company where I do celebrate the disability experience through expressive art workshops and performances. And that's a little bit about me. So.
Great. Thank you for sharing. We'll see you in a bit. All right, and last but certainly not least, we have Allie.
Hello, my name is Allie. I am a, I guess late 20s now because it was just my birthday, white cis female. I have messy curly red hair, no makeup on, some dark plastic glasses, and my face is about all you can see in this picture, besides the light gray wall behind me. And I'm here because I also have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and the associated comorbidities, and a few autoimmune disorders and immune deficiencies. So that's what I've been dealing with. But happy to be here and ready to go.
And we're glad to have you here. Great, thank you for sharing. We'll see you in a bit. I think we're actually all gonna pop back on here. We're gonna get started. If you have any questions for the panel, feel free to put them in the comments wherever you're watching. We'll take a look and we'll answer those questions. If you haven't seen part one, I suggest you go back and watch that because we covered a lot of ground last week and a lot of great information from our panelists. But to get started, I want to start with a very specific question that I know comes up not necessarily a lot, but I think people aren't sure how to navigate it. It's type of language, whether we want to consider it person first or identity first language. And I think this also is a personal preference depending on the person, but I wanted to open that up for our panelists to kind of say whether or not they prefer identity first or person first and why, or if there's any reason why you would pick one over the other. And I'll start with Allie.
So I have been sick all my life, but I was not really diagnosed until my late teens. And so when I went to college and I realized I needed to work with the disability student services to get the accommodations that I needed, it was very difficult for me because I didn't want to admit that I was disabled because that had always been, a word with a negative connotation in my life. But now, it's kind of the opposite. I do not care if you say that I'm disabled. I don't think it's a dirty word. I think it's something that, able-bodied people need to embrace and learn to be comfortable with, because I'm disabled and that's fine. And, while other people may prefer, person first language, saying they're a person with a disability, I don't care as long as you aren't saying differently abled or handy capable or some euphemism like that to kind of, skirt around the actual reality of being disabled and trying to soften the blow. I don't care. I want to be treated like a regular human being. You wouldn't feel uncomfortable saying that somebody is able-bodied, so please don't feel uncomfortable saying that I'm disabled, but make sure that you know what the person you're talking to or about prefers.
Great, thank you. I agree that it's a lot of, again, we can't assume, and no one can assume anything, but if someone says, hey, I prefer this, then the respect would be that you respect what their preference is. I'm gonna pass it over to Jen now.
Hey, I feel pretty strongly about this one, that I prefer identity first language. I cannot divest myself from my disability. I cannot leave it at home when I don't feel like dealing with it. I think the term person with disabilities was something that was coined by non-disabled people about us, and comes with the idea that you need to see us as a person, that you don't see us as a person before you use the term. I disavow that. I do not want that in my life. I am disabled. You wouldn't say, person with female or person with gay. It is part of who we are. It is part of our identity. And I think that person with a disability was a term that used to be something that helped us kind of progress in the movement. But at this point in time, I feel very strongly that I'm proud of being disabled. It's an amazing culture. It's an amazing group of people. it has an incredible history, and it's a powerful community, and that's something I draw strength from. So I am disabled, like, period, end of story.
Great, thank you for sharing. And I think it's also interesting that what ADA just celebrated the 30th anniversary, which is crazy that to think like, oh, disability's only been around for 30 years. That's not true. It's been around since the dawn of time, but this community just became something that's starting to fight for equality essentially within the community. And so for 30 years that's been happening, but disability has been happening since the dawn of time. It's not that 30 years ago people started to have disability.
Yeah, and one other thing is I actually prefer, instead of using the term able-bodied, I prefer using non-disabled, because for me, I think we can normalize disability. I think we don't have to say that I'm able to do things. I may be disabled, but I am also able. So non-disabled to me is the term that I prefer to use for people who do not have disabilities, who are non-disabled.
Great, I love that. Diana, you're up.
Great. So I want to piggyback on Jennifer, what Jennifer said. I went through an interesting journey. I think I grew up in the time of person. I came with age and the person-first language, and that was very much a part of my DNA and a part of my earlier part of my life, overcoming my disability that was acute, and kind of almost wanting that, not ashamed of it, but when I first acted, it was like, in a way saying, well, I want to do this, I don't want to always, kind of in a way, I wouldn't say I was ashamed of it, but I didn't see it as much as a part of my identity as I do now. And I kind of went through that journey of, I thought because of my age, age-wise, I say, my birth certificate says Negro. I was born in Negro, grew up as an African American with a handicapping condition, and now I am a disabled woman of color. And it's been within the past few years that I've really embraced that cultural identity. Being also growing up in an environment where I was one of the only African Americans, I've had a lot of, I grew up hearing about, having books about my African American history, but not learning a lot about my disability history. Some of it was happening while I was growing up. The 504 protests were happening while I was coming of age, and I really, when I went to graduate school, was the first time when I did my thesis that I said, I'm going to incorporate that part of my identity into my thesis. And so when I did my thesis on my character, I researched disability history and how my character may have been treated at that time to justify her depression. And I learned, there was so much I learned about this history that I didn't know I had. And so there's very much now a celebration. It's true. It's like I can't separate racism and ableism and sexism from me. They all are part of who I am. They're all a part of marginalized groups I'm a part of. And now also getting into the ageism, just because, especially in Hollywood when you're over 35, so it's like being part of all those marginalized groups, but seeing that as a source of pride and seeing that as, yes, I want to represent strong, passionate, older woman, disabled woman. So it is something that is still a process for me because I was so used to person with a disability that it's been a wonderful journey of embracing that as a proud part of my identity, and hopefully teach, one of my workshops I call Celebrating the Disability Experience. there is a lot to celebrate. When people interview me about overcoming my disability, I say, no, I've overcome the stigmas associated with my disability. That's a very different mindset. So that is where I'm at. I've been on this incredible journey of embracing that part of my identity, and it's just been and continues to be an incredible journey for me.
Thank you for sharing. I actually really loved when you said celebrating the disability experience. I think that phrase, to me, struck a chord with me, which I really enjoyed. It's like, it is taking this celebration of what we've been offered and what we've been given and finding ways to celebrate it, or to, there's a word that I'm thinking of with an E that I can't think of right now, like exclamation, but that's not the word. But, you know, having that joy in discovering what makes us unique.
Exaltation.
Exaltation, yes. I think that sounds about right. That might be it. I don't know for sure, but something with an E and an X. So it might be that, like, praise, like exaltation. Yeah, that makes sense. Great, thank you for wrapping my brain around my brain. Great, Eileen, you're up.
Okay, so I'm also of the earlier generation, and I've been advocating, for nearly 30 years in our industry. So I've been among the group who, one, grew up where I was the only person with a disability I knew, and was therefore treated like I was an outcast, a reject, not welcome, not valued, not worthy. So, and the way the industry treated me when I was a young girl and should have been probably working the most, they treated me like an outcast, a reject, not worthy. So I'm pointing all this out for a reason. I think that the people who are, I'm going to call us old school, the ones that have been around a little while, have gone through such a journey just trying to get the world to understand that we are valuable human beings, that we are human beings. And growing up, the word disabled was a terrible word for us. It meant you can't play. It meant you're not able, you're not worthy, you're not of value, because it meant that so strongly. Almost all the people I know that are old school still cringe with the word disability. Even Danny Murphy, I don't know if any of you knew him, but he was the one who was a quadriplegic, who was the reason the Farrelly brothers started including people with disabilities in their movies. And I remember saying to him after he took me out on a sailboat ride that he was the captain of the ship. When we went out on this little sailboat, just me and him, and he's a quad. And I remember afterwards getting off the boat and somebody saying something about, it's incredible that you're disabled and you do all this. And he goes, I'm not disabled. I'm not disabled at all. And that's what he believed. And I understand, and I see the faces going, I understand that the younger generations don't understand the trauma that people like me and Diana and Danny Murphy grew up with that word. And I've noticed in all my years of advocating, it works for the new younger generations, and the older ones are still going, and I'm glad that everybody pointed out that it needs to be a preference, just like we all have all agreed with every other difference in every other marginalized community that each person should be allowed to be referred to or however they want to be. I still, in my guts and in my heart and my soul, cringe when they label my articles like that just went out in Forbes calling me disabled woman. And the reason is the rest of society is just not there yet. And no matter how far we've fought and how far we've come, they are still not there. And the reason that matters is because I am too old to keep hoping for the day that it changes and being willing to not work. That when I started really speaking up in our industry, every door slammed shut. I went for years that I couldn't get an audition because I was speaking up for disability inclusion and they weren't ready. And I'm now too old to keep being willing to put myself in that position because I'm not going to always be able to fight at the pace that I've been fighting. I've got to make a living one day and I've got to retire one day. That has to happen. I've already sacrificed so much of my life advocating to get this this industry to open up. And believe me, the battles have been so much harder than you can imagine. I've been made fun of in front of groups of people multiple times, adults in our industry, literally. I've been told, how dare you speak up for this community that people do not want in front of the camera. I mean, you would not believe the horrific abuse. And so I share this with all of you so that you all understand that some of the 3 or 5 people that have been in the game as many years as Diana and I have, we have been through so much hell that it's got to be understandable that we might not use the same words. And we shouldn't have to. We should be called whatever we want. The reason that I have a problem with it is, you know, the actual meaning of the actual word, if you look it up, it means not able. It means that. And I get that other people want to use it, and that's fine. And the younger generations, you have time. You get to change the world. You have time to battle with this 80% for a really, you have time. I don't anymore. And I've done all of my battling. And I realize that if I keep putting that first, they're never going to hire me. And I can't afford that anymore. I already missed my entire 20s and my entire 30s of wanting to, trying to work. So for that reason, I've gotten to the point, even in my advocacy, where that's why I've been mentoring so many people coming up behind me to take over, to take the torch and run, because I'm at the point where I need them to focus on my skills and my abilities. And you'll hear in all of my advocating and in all the things that go out into the world, how much I'm still trying to stress, because I'm talking to the people that haven't let us in yet. I'm trying to stress to them the value that people with disabilities bring into the world, into the workplace, into the characters, into everything we do, the strength and the value. And not everybody appreciates that message that I have, but I think the people that have been in the battle longest understand the need, because I think the people in the disabled community do understand where the old school crowd is coming from and how we've fought to get us this far. And I'm all for everybody picking up the torch and run with it, whatever language you want to use, absolutely go for it. But I also know to this day, there are casting offices that will not bring me in because I was the girl who spoke up 20 years ago. 20 years ago, there are still casting offices that refuse to look at my work because I was the girl bringing in and speaking up and saying, what are you talking about? There's no talent in the disabled community. What are you talking about? There's so many disabled people. And the pain and the literal years that I could only get 2 auditions a year. So I only share all this so that I hope that the younger generations know that the people that have been around the longest might want to be called Eileen first. And yeah, I have a disability. So what? I can still do everything anyone else can do. I can still run companies. I can still produce films. I can still write screenplays. I can still get into the actor's studio, work with Academy Award winners. I can do anything that anyone can do. And I challenge them all to find a single thing that I do at a lesser level than anyone else, except I can't run and I can't walk without a limp, and I can't live my life without pain. Oh, well, but I don't make that their problem. I want to get people to start focusing on the value we bring, We have so much value and life experience to bring to every single thing we do. And I believe that. I think I just did an article that's going to go out to 130 countries. And I talked about how, society doesn't work right now. Everyone's upset about how society is just a big mess and the whole world's falling apart. And I'm like, well, that's what happens when you leave out your game changers. That is what happens when you leave out your strongest people. And I so to the core of my soul believe that people who have handled disability and society's rejection all their lives are the strongest people. They are the most capable of change, adapting to environments They are the most capable of enduring hard times. They are the most capable of handling whatever life throws at them because they've done it all their lives. And so in that case, I feel like when the world's in trouble, you need to bring in the people who've been through the most. And so my conversation might not always make sense to the younger generations that are just coming in, but believe me, you're coming into a road that we paved with blood, sweat, and tears. And we paved it so that you can come through and say whatever you want. So I applaud you all for saying whatever you want, and only ask everyone to please allow us to go on where we are, trying to just make a living and survive. And please understand where we're coming from as well. Like, you know, there was a time Diana and I sat outside this Screen Actors Guild. Do you remember this, Diana? And cheering on all the people coming up behind us and looking at each other saying, I'm so happy it's finally changing. And I'm so sad that we didn't get our shot, you know, that we didn't get to have the careers that we should have had because the world just wasn't ready. But we're so thrilled that they're ready now. And the changes have literally just begun. It's like a tidal wave coming down on our industry. And I hope that you guys will all pick up the torch and run and say whatever you want to say as loud as you want to say it, because now really is the time. And know that I'm back here cheering you all on in the biggest way. Huge. And last thing I want to say is that the other people who have different language are, like, I'm in a lot of the spinal cord injury groups. And these are people who suddenly became disabled because of accidents and things like that. And that group has a harder time with saying disabled first, because they do want to go back to where they were. They do want to walk again. They do want to, and I know, I mean, some people see it as a bad thing, but I know that I spent my entire life wanting to walk again and stay walking again. And it's why I've had all the surgeries I've had. I've spent my entire life wanting to beat the cancer, find the cure for the cancer syndrome that killed my mother, so I don't have to die. She died at this age, you know, like, I want a cure for cancer, and I understand the people with spinal cord injuries who actually want to walk again. I don't shame them for that or blame them for that. Of course they want back what they had. And when I was a little girl, I wanted back what I had, the ability to walk, and I fought really hard for that and suffered a lot of painful surgeries and things when I've had a lot of people say to me, well, just use a wheelchair. And I'm like, you understand, I get that that's an option, but I wanted to walk, you know, and that's my choice. You know, other people might not want to, and that's okay too. But I'm glad this discussion is happening, because I want everyone to understand that it's individual to everyone. And some people want to be known as disabled and have been all their lives, and they're born that way, and that is where they're at. And that is their identity, and that is completely valid. And then there are other people who that's not their number one identity, and they want to be seen as an artist, an actor, a writer first. Peace out.
Thank you, Aileen. There's a lot to take in, I think, with that. And that actually made me think of, on a quick sidebar, my journey as someone with a disability, because I wasn't born with my partial blindness. I was, at the age of 10, one day woke up and couldn't see out of one eye. And I think what people don't realize is, out of a lot of the marginalized communities, disability is one of the few that can happen at any time for anyone. And I think that people have to understand that with disability, having the voice of advocates who are non-disabled, who are able to help give us the voice to use that platform to be able to speak up, is great. Because as a 10-year-old, I didn't have anyone to look up to with partial blindness or any disabilities. And it's like, well, now I feel like I'm this outcast. I feel alone. And that's at the age of 10. I felt awful because I had no one else that was like me. And so I think that that's something that it's nice to see either having advocates or other people who are like me in some way, shape, or form, it really helps me be like, oh, there are others like me, and there are others who are willing to help advocate for me. And so I think that that's what I missed as a 10-year-old. And so I think that's what I hope people understand, is that we need voices of people who are non-disabled in order to help us have our voices told. And I think having that army. And going off of that, I want to jump into our next question, because there's a trending topic right now with all these Netflix movies that are out. One was Cuties, where talking about how it's sexualizing tweens, and how there's a petition to get that off of Netflix. But now Split has come up on Netflix as a petition to take that off, the M. Night Shyamalan movie, because of the way it portrays dissociative identity disorder as very villainous and like all this, like, you know, really terrible things, which isn't necessarily the case. And so I want to talk a little bit about previous and current portrayal of disability in movies in Hollywood. I know for me, Bubble Boy is real problematic as a movie, and The Other Sister is also very problematic as a movie. And I think that I want to talk about if there's any movies that you know of that really need to reassess the way that they portray disability, or we talked a little bit about this last week, movies or TV shows or any kind of entertainment that's done it right, or at least right to an extent. And we talked about a couple shows last week, but if anyone wants to jump in on...
Can you tell us a little bit about the ones you just mentioned? Because I haven't had time to watch all these things.
Sure. So
okay.
Bubble Boy is a movie with Jake Gyllenhaal, who lives in a bubble. I can't remember what the disability is that they put in the movie. It's been so long since I've seen it, because it just was not well done as far as the portrayal, but it was made as a comedy. It was made to make fun of this person who lives in a bubble and has like, it's like an autoimmune disorder, I think, of some kind. And it was a comedy to make fun of, like, and then at the end, it's like, oh, this person, of course, they have a disability. So it's this surprising thing that they fall in love and that they want to get the girl at the end. It's like, okay, you know, we talked about this last week. We still love. We have feelings. We're humans. Like, that's how it is. But it made it feel like this, like, it was like this inspiration that this person with the disability fell in love with the girl, and he gets the girl in the end, and all this stuff. And the actual portrayal of it, first of all, Jake Gyllenhaal doesn't have autoimmune diseases, and secondly, it was portrayed as a comedic element as opposed to a real life element. The Other Sister, I can't remember either, but I'm pretty sure either she had
some developmental disabilities.
Yeah, developmental disabilities, and it was portrayed by someone who did not have developmental disabilities. So it crossed a big line. And again, neither one of these movies did very well in the box office, and neither one got good reviews. So I guess that's also kind of a sign in that regard of, like, if you're having people inaccurately portray things, then, you know, just kind of consider that. So those are my two. I'm going to go look. I know everyone had some things to say. Allie has some, and then Diana has some things to say as well. So Allie, then Diana. And yeah, Boy in the Plastic Bubble. That was the original Bubble Boy. Thank you, KN.
So we talked about this last week, but it's something that whenever I see it, because it keeps happening, is so constantly on my nerves, this portrayal of disability as something either romanticized and inspirational or villainous and mysterious in some way. And I hate, you know, watching those movies, because it's just full of tropes and I can predict exactly what's going to happen, and what's going to happen isn't based in any sort of reality, and the people who are portraying the disabled people aren't actually disabled, so it's not authentic. There's just nothing for me. It's just a bunch of people without disabilities using disability as a way to feel something, which grosses me out to, no extent. And, me as somebody with what are referred to as, invisible disabilities, which isn't entirely true. But, one thing that people without disabilities think of when they think of a disabled person is, somebody with crutches, somebody in a wheelchair, somebody with like a huge back brace, some obviously visible sign, something to other them in some way. But because that's not a part of my experience as a disabled person. You know, when I was a kid, you know, I was bullied horribly, and even throughout my life, it's been like, oh, are you really sick? But then they turn around to the media and use us as, you know, Oscar bait. And or something like, I remember there was Red Band Society about all these kids who were in the hospital at the same time, and and it's like, in one part, you know, somebody who's hooked up to oxygen lights a cigarette and they don't explode. And I'm like,
and it only lasts one season.
Okay, that's not possible. And you know, again, it's just so gross to me that it's kind of fetishized in a way. You know, it's just for entertainment. You take somebody's reality and use it for your own entertainment instead of educating yourself and, you know, actually making life easier and equal for those people. You just, you know, want them to dance for you like a trained poodle. And it's not even those people. It's just because you're not hiring disabled people either. It's just not very humane at all. In the article that I linked, that we can drop in the comments, is by Roger Ebert, who obviously is a very well-known movie critic, speaking about able-bodied actors and people with disabilities being able to be represented. And, you know, it just breaks it down into such a simplified way. You know, like, would you hire a white person to play a black person and have them just do blackface? No. So you shouldn't hire a person without disabilities to play somebody who has disabilities. And there's the question I always get next is, well, you know, what if the most talented person isn't somebody with a disability? I think and it just plays into this narrative that there aren't talented disabled people out there, and if there are, it's not enough of them. And it's like, okay, well, maybe you should make auditions more accessible, you know, make your management company more accessible, think about diversity. And instead of saying, well, they're not good enough, you should break down those barriers so that, one, you see us as good enough to begin with, and so two, we have the same opportunities that have made people without disabilities be able to be these superstars, because right now we don't, you know?
Mm-hmm. I agree. Diana, and then Eileen.
Okay. Yeah, you know, I think this is such a complex issue to unpack. So I'm just gonna focus on one thing. Also, part of me find offensive is that many times when a non-disabled actor portrays someone, especially with an intellectual disability, there's a tendency for them to talk like a big baby. That's what they call it. I mean, they get something like the other sister, where, you know, even Sean Penn and well, the movie Sean Penn did a few years ago, but I can't think. It's both the yeah. And they talk like a baby, do this like baby talk, and that is supposed to represent somebody with an intellectual disability, and it's offensive. It's incredibly offensive. And, you know, so that's one of the things, you know, the portrayals, and again, like Allison said, you know, we don't, you know, they use the excuse for bankability or whatever. That's always the excuse. There's not a bankable person after with a disability. Or here's the thing. You become a bankable star because you've had opportunities to work. Mm-hmm. That's how it happens. Rarely, there often doesn't happen, but usually if you look at TV, if you look back at old shows, you will recognize someone and you go, oh, I see how they built their career up. Brad Pitt once was on a soap opera. Brad Pitt was a driver in Thelma and Louise. He had, Denzel Washington was on St. Elsewhere years ago. They've had opportunities to build up their career and open the door to get to the level they have. And I'm not saying they don't deserve it. I'm just saying they had opportunities. We have, as a community of actors, have not still had those opportunities to be seen as more bankable stars, for lack of a better word. We have not had those opportunities, but it becomes a double-edged sword, right? It becomes a double-edged, and and then when we got the images, we rarely see images of African Americans with disabilities. So there's so much to unpack, but again, the grandmother clock in my house, my parents' house, but blackface, you would not do blackface right now. You would never do blackface, never, ever, ever. And so why we continue to find things acceptable, and why we continue to find and applaud someone for the research they did, as if you're doing a trained skill. It's a life experience, not a trained skill. And it gets very frustrating to see disability portrayed as something you can put on and put off like a hat.
Yes. I just finished another topic.
So yeah. Yeah, that's the voice of my nephew. I get distracted. So yeah, my life is happening right now as we speak, and I apologize.
Oh,
So
no.
that's basically what I'm gonna say. I think it's just. I do think we've made tremendous progress, but I got very emotional when I was speaking, because those of us who've been at the banging down the door for a long time, and I'm thrilled for the people that are coming behind me, but there are still things, even as an older actor, I hope to have happen, because there are older actresses out there, and I want to be a part of that. I'm not going to deny that, but it's frustrating to feel like we're saying, I'm laughing right now because my mom is telling my nephew the same thing over and over again. I can feel like I'm just right now. But that's what it feels like. It feels like I'm saying, take a bath now. Go take a bath now. You have to take a bath now. Go. What have I told you? And that's what it feels like in the industry. We're like, what is it going to take? We've been saying it and saying it and saying it and saying it, and yet doors are opening, but we still get pushback, and that gets really frustrating after a while.
I agree, and I was also going to say, when you mentioned African Americans with disabilities, I put it in our little private chat, but the movie Ray, I'm going to call it out. I love that movie, but it's like Jamie Foxx won an Oscar for portraying Ray Charles, who is blind, and my first thought after all these years in this discussion is there really no blind black actor who could have played Ray that was not a sighted actor? And I don't buy that there was not a single person. And now I get that movies want to make money. They really want to make money, so they want big names attached. But there are so many other non-disabled characters in that movie that could have been played by big name stars, and you have someone who, again, we're talking about giving us these chances. This was a role, Ray Charles is a role for a actor who is blind and black to play, to become a new face that we can enjoy in these movies. And yet they went with someone who is completely sighted, who ended up winning an Oscar for being an inspiration in a movie. And
nobody knew who Marley Matlin was when Children of the Lesser God came out. they paired her with William Hurt. And they're Marley Joy because she's from Chicago area and I was. That was a big deal. No one knew she was Peanut Butter Falcon. Same story. They put Zach and surrounded him with bigger name. That was never the hit movie. That movie would not have been the same if they had hired a non-disabled actor. So, the Bright Side, or whatever that movie that just came out with Bryan Cranston that had another young Brian, but that was another one. Nicole Kidman and Kevin Hart are bigger name stars. You're right. You can surround Ray with bigger name actors, and maybe there is an actor who would have had an opportunity to have a life-changing role, like Marlee Matlin got. It's so challenging for her, but it's giving that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. And also, I think you mentioned The Upside, which is another one where you have Nicole Kidman and you have Kevin Hart, as you said. So why can't Bryan Cranston's character be portrayed by someone who is a wheelchair user? Why does it have to be every single person is an A-list actor? So, that's another thing. I know Eileen had something to say, so I'm going to pass it over to Eileen.
Okay, so I'm so with Diana on everything she was talking about. But in 2000 and I think it was 8 or 9, there was a big show. I won't say the network. I won't say the name. A showrunner that you would think would be very diverse because he's in another marginalized community. And the lead character was exactly my age, exactly my description. She had a walking disability. I cried when I read the pilot because literally they were looking for a girl with a walking disability. And the story was that her disability was caused by a vaccine, which is what caused mine in my childhood. And I thought, yes, finally my shot. And I couldn't even get an audition. I had to go over everybody's heads. I had to call everyone I knew in this industry to get to them to call over everyone's heads to get me an audition. This was a casting office that has notoriously discriminated, not the main casting director, because she never got to see my work, but the people who work for her were the gatekeepers who just always gave me the looking at a leper look when I would squeak in for a 2-line nonsense role. But they would always give me that look, that wilting, passive-aggressive look, like, you're lucky we even let you walk in our door and you're never getting this role. That look is on their face. And so I had to go over everybody's head to get called in. And so I did. And I got brought in for this thing that was so close to home, you would have felt like somebody wrote it for me. And I got coached by one of the best coaches in this industry because I'd done a play for her through the Actors Studio. I nailed that audition. The casting director sat back in her chair and said, "Wow, you're a real actor. Why have I never seen you before?" And I literally looked at the women in her room with her and said, "I have no idea." And because they were the reason I never got in their door. She called my agent about 2 weeks later and said, "I am really sad to tell you that the network has decided that unless this is played by a name, they're not making the show." Now, we all know that this industry can turn anyone into a name overnight. We all know that. If they decide tomorrow they're going to make Diana Elizabeth Jordan a star, all they got to do is stick their PR teams on it, and it's a done deal, especially in our community, because we all have life stories that are of great interest to everyone out there. And we know that, and it's the reason everybody tries to make us their inspirational story, because our stories are freaking fascinating to everybody. So given that, all they have to do is decide that you're the one they're going to make a star next, just like they did with, sorry, I'm going to forget his name, but the guy that played Stephen Hawking in The Theory of Everything. Nobody knew who he was before.
Eddie Redmayne.
Right. So nobody knew who he was. They could have easily given that role to somebody like Tobias Forrest, or somebody who is in a wheelchair, or somebody who has some experience with mobility disability, and then they can add to that experience. My big issue is, don't say you can't hire a person with a disability because they're in a wheelchair, but then there's the flashback where they're up and moving. There are 40 million Americans who are walking, who have had either wheelchairs or crutches in their lifetime, spinal cord injury walkers, people who have experience with both, who have the experience. So here's my issue. All the nonsense that the industry gives us that are the reasons to not hire us, they are hurting themselves. Because the reality is, if I want to portray Diana's life experience, I have no concept of what she's been through except what she shares with me. Now, a person with a disability has a depth of experience that is unusual to people who haven't dealt with it. When you have someone living with chronic pain, that is an experience that is completely unusual. What that means is that that actor is going to make a different choice. Those choices are different, they are specific, they are deep, and they are moving choices. Now, the reason that we have such a devastating, I don't know what word to say because there's so many words, so many awful portrayals where, like me before you, no matter how great my life is, I'm going to kill myself. Where I know a lot of people with disabilities that if they had all the resources that guy had and the love of their life climbing on their lap, they're not going to kill themselves. The reality is that the reason so many people think that is because they've never seen disability portrayed by someone that has the kind of spirit to endure it. So therefore, I can laugh at a lot of things that a lot of people can't laugh at. My choices are always different. There is a reason that at a very young age, I went to the actor's studio playing a character in a wheelchair. They didn't know who I was. They knew nothing about me. And there is a reason that I made it into the actor's studio as early and as easily as I did. There's a reason why many years later, people will still talk about those opening audition scenes I did, because they had never seen a person dealing with the situation my character was dealing with on the stage with a wheelchair that had that life experience, and it moved them, right? So the depth of experience is what I'm trying to get the industry to understand. Now, if they had made that show for that network and put me in that role, I can guarantee you one thing, they would have made me a name really fast. Then my whole path would have been much easier. I wouldn't have had to fight so hard for my health insurance through all these years. I would have been able to afford things like having a family, things that everybody else wants to have, things like thinking one day you'll be able to retire if you want to. You know, a lot of things were taken away from me and I'm telling you one instance, but there were hundreds of them, of roles that were literally taken away. And if people didn't have such a fear and a misunderstanding about what we bring to the table, it's why I'm still constantly hitting hard the depth and the value that we bring. And I have sort of a little bit been shamed recently by a very young person coming into the industry who's like, stop acting like we have something more to offer than somebody else. And I'm like, but we do. We have more life experience to offer than the average human who's had no challenges up to this age. We do have more to offer. I'm not saying you have to play a superhero. I'm just saying, please let these actors come in and bring to the table what they have. You know, like I think I told you last week that I just recently turned down a lead role in a film because they wanted to just hire someone with a disability. but the lead character is blind. I don't have that life experience. So I said, I've got to shift gears on you guys. I'm so sorry. I so appreciate the offer and I need the work. However, we have got to do a thorough search of this entire industry and this entire country, if necessary, to see if you've got an actor who is blind who can play this role. Because their life experience is so different than mine. It is, and that matters, and you feel it in the role. And like when I recently played this character with a spinal cord injury and a cancer survivor in New Amsterdam, I got letters from people across the country I've never met. I don't know who they are, saying thank you for accurately portraying a spinal cord injury. And what they were talking about specifically was the depth of emotion. And, you know, when Allison talked about horrific bullying, I went through that my whole childhood. And then I came into the industry and dealt with it for a lot of years. So I have, every time somebody even says bullying, I feel like a little, like I have to take a breath, because it's not hard to remember what that was like as a child. It's horrible. And it's one of the reasons that I keep battling and haven't quit the industry, because I don't want a kid to ever feel that way again. I want to somehow shake up and wake up the whole world to realize that we have to stop making life harder for kids that already are dealing with painful physical challenges or painful mental challenges that are already hard enough. And then we have to make their life more difficult. And then we have to abuse them at school, abuse them in the workplace, keep them out of work, keep them from living their dreams. We are human beings, and we all have a dream and a purpose on this earth. And I don't think I told you guys before, but yeah, Allison, the bullying didn't stop. I remember being stunned one time when people made fun of me right in a room full of people when one of my shows aired, and somebody literally got up and made fun of the way I walk across the room. You know, it's just, I have no words to say how hard it is to have been in this world and in this industry before people started waking up. It has been a very, very painful battle. And the losses to our livelihoods and our lives because people weren't accepting us for who we are. And it literally is, Allison, one of the only reasons I stayed in the battle this long, because I never want another child to be bullied just because there's something different about them. We're not weak, we're not incapable, we're none of that. We are just different, and everybody's different. Everybody's different. If we weren't different, the human race would totally suck. You know, we are all different, and in so many ways. And what we need to get them to keep understanding is that our differences are our strengths, and we have a lot to bring to these roles and a lot of depth to bring to the table. I've proved it on the stage. I've proved it at the Actors Studio, and in the roles I've gotten, I've proven it there. I've always shown up and did my job times 10. One area that I want to say, and I'm grateful, no offense, Spencer, at all, but I'm grateful that the majority of this panel are women, and I'm going to tell you why.
I said that too, straight up. I said that. I was so excited about it.
I'm going to tell you why, because if you watch what's happening now, do you know that the industry has gotten into the habit of skipping over the Diana Jordans of the world, the Eileen Grubas of the world, and literally going out and finding people who are not even actors, who are not trained, who have not been in this battle, and because they're prettier or younger or easier to look at, or their disability can be hidden, they're plucking them up and sticking them in series regular roles and pushing them out into the world and making them known. Now, I'm grateful because they have actual disabilities, so I'm glad for that. But at the same time, I'm like, what is so hard about just accepting and including the people that have been fighting for so many years? And I've stepped back and I've watched this going on for years now, and I realized, you know what the big issue is? they still believe a woman can't have a visible, perceptible flaw of any kind. They still have this illusion of perfection for women. I have had people say to me, if you were a man, it wouldn't matter. Your limp wouldn't matter if you were a man. Well, I challenge that because I'm like, why can't women have disabilities? Why can't a woman have a limp? Why can't women have scars or illnesses or challenges and still be valued? Why can't we? And so I'm really speaking up more and more and more and more. I agree with you. I don't like it being called a flaw either. I'm coming from the perception of how they've treated me. They're like, well, you have a flaw, so you can't work. And I'm like, but, you know, I have a disability. Okay, I have a challenge. I have a difference. Yeah, you're right. They don't consider it, Allison just said, because they don't consider it pretty. Well, I think all women need to stand up and say, I have a right to be whatever I am, whatever I am. You know, in my 20s, I was like, well, if I have to be perfect, then everyone else has to be perfect. If I'm not good enough, then guess what? No one else is. You know, and for a little while, my brain was like that. Like, okay, well, I see something wrong with you, and I see something wrong with you, and I see, you know, and then I was like, Eileen, you can't go there. Because yes, everyone has something. And I really hope the young women keep demanding, because still on TV, you know, even when they want to include disability, they'll include someone who doesn't have a visible physical challenge. They don't want to see that. They still don't want to see it. And a few of my friends, and one of them you guys mentioned, Catherine Beatty, who's a writer for NCIS, and she and I are good friends. And she was on crutches for a long time, and then she started. I hope she doesn't mind I'm sharing her story. I know she's shared it out there, but she went back and forth from crutches to wheelchair. Now she spends more time in her wheelchair. And we had a discussion about the fact that when you're on crutches or when you're limping, people are meaner. And it's like, why? Like, women aren't allowed to limp or be on crutches, or, you know, they're just meaner. And so I just sit there and I go, you know what? Why are you meaner? Because we're women, because we're showing that there's something, you know, that society doesn't think is perfect, you know. But I reject that notion. You know, I think we're all perfect exactly as we are, and every one of us has a difference. You know, we all have different hair, we all have different eyes, we have different faces, we have different cells in all our bodies, and every difference is perfect. I think is perfection. And so I can't wait until we can get the industry to understand that you can show a woman on TV that's disabled too, and you can show a woman, yes, who's in a wheelchair, and yes, who's over 20, and who isn't just a child that's cute. And that's okay too, but I'm saying it's okay if it's a woman who's older, who has, they don't want to show women. They just don't want to show women with challenges. And I'm kind of sick of it. Disabled women are still being kept out.
Yeah, I agree. As a cis white male who happens to have a disability, I've noticed it's been a lot easier for me as someone with a disability because of my cis white male privilege. And for me, my disability is physical. You can see it if you look at me, but it's so subtle that when you don't look at my headshot, you don't really notice it. So I have this invisible disability almost, in a way, even though it's a physically seeable thing, which actually leads me into my, I'll say my last question for a panel. If you have to hop off, but it relates to visible versus invisible disability, as well as we had talked about a little bit of disability erasure as well. And I know I don't really want to group them together because it's a lot, it's very heavy, but because we're running out of time, I wanted to say if anyone had to speak on either invisible versus visible disability or disability erasure, because I think that would be something that I want to discuss. And I want to preface this by saying one time I told someone I had a disability on Facebook, and someone literally posted on Facebook, you're a white male just touting that you have an invisible disability just so you can be diverse. And it upset me. It really upset me, because this is when I first started to be like, oh, I need to advocate for myself. I need to, I have this thing. I need to just find ways to advocate and to find the accessibility. And that really crushed me, because I was like, you don't know me. This person didn't even know me, and they were judging me because of what their perception was of me. Didn't even ask what my disability was, didn't even care. They just said I'm a white guy, so I can't have a disability, which they're two different things. And it's hard to like say like, yeah, I'm a white male, you know, this and that, but the disability aspect, they don't go hand in hand. I'm a white male, I also have a disability. They're two different things. And I think that that's what really frustrated me is I'm just being like, oh, you're a white guy, so obviously you're just trying to find a reason to be diverse. And it's like, well, I'm not trying. I have a disability. Like there's that idea. But anyways, speaking on visible, invisible disability and or disability erasure, if anyone wants to speak on that. Jen, go ahead. Jen and Allie.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been told I'm too pretty to have a disability. I'm too young to have a disability. You know, all of that. And I think that there is a huge amount of erasure of invisible disabilities. If I don't have my mobility aids, if I'm not wearing my braces, I am invisibly disabled. That does not mean I am any less disabled day to day. And it's really frustrating because the industry perpetrate, you know, there's always this trope of the disabled person who's faking it. And by erasing invisible disabilities, by erasing the idea of by not perpetuating the idea of a spectrum of disability, we are just setting ourselves up for failure. People are harassed for using their placards. They are told they're faking it when they have a device one day and they don't the next. You know, it's really hard to have, even within the community, people saying you're not this enough. You don't fit. You don't belong. And it's, or that if I have my chair, then I'm okay. And if I don't, then I'm not. No, we need to be legitimizing the idea that disabled people can come in all sorts of shapes, sizes, packages, devices, you know, thin, fat, you know, queer. You know, I know there's an openly disabled person who is also has a degree in disability studies who is now on The Boys. You know, like we come in all of these varieties, and I think to dismiss people within our community, I think we have to be explaining that the definition of disability is so much broader than people think it is. You know, that people don't think of mental illness as disability. People don't think of addiction as disability, and they belong with us. And by expanding those ideas, by not saying you're not, if you must be this disabled to participate in the community, you know, that is furthering the othering of our community. When we tell stories about disabled people, so often we erase their disability. People like Frida Kahlo or Harriet Tubman, you know, these are people who disability was a huge part of their lives. And when we tell their stories, they're not disabled anymore. That, you know, you ask people about who they know historically who was disabled, and the only name you ever get is Helen Keller. Maybe Beethoven, but usually Helen Keller. And we wonder why, like, people don't identify with the community, is because they don't recognize that our entire history is steeped with disability. And until we get people in positions where they are greenlighting projects, where they are creating projects, where they are directing projects, you know, it's not just about the casting. It has to be at the top. It has to be executives. You know, I'm a producer, and I have heard executives talking about how people are too fat to be on television, how people don't want to watch that. Well, you get disabled execs, you're going to get a very different group of people on television. Whenever you have marginalized people, you're going to get a very different group of people being involved. And that is where we're going to start getting those stories and getting people to connect. Yeah, that's all.
I really appreciate your vulnerability. It's I don't know the word. I'm losing all my words today, but it makes me feel like I'm not alone in that world, because I know that even in both the disability community and without the disability community, it's a lot of like, well, you can still see, so you're not that blind, or, you know, all these things that I get. And then this has been the struggle with me, is like, okay, I'm this white guy, so I should have all this, and I'm blind, so I should have all this and all this, but I kind of lie somewhere in the middle. And I'm actually going to throw out a line that Mirage wrote once in a show that I was in, which is, what's that place in between invisible and being seen? And I feel like for years, I felt like I was just stuck in that place of like, where do I go? What do I do? What do I embrace? What do I hide? Do I hide? Do I embrace? And I think that it's not that it feels good that I know that there are other people that feel the same way, but it makes me realize I'm not alone, and that I know that these feelings are feelings that other people have too. So I appreciate your vulnerability on that end. Pass it over to Allie.
Yeah, I wanted to echo what Jennifer said, and also provide, a counterpoint to what Eileen has been saying, because I do agree a lot. But, for somebody with a visible or perceptible disability, it's going to be easier. You're going to see the times where they pick someone who isn't. And for someone who, has invisible disabilities, you're going to see the times when they say, well, you don't look disabled, you're not disabled enough, all this stuff. And things, just because I'm young, the industry is still not even close to good. I'm not being plucked for all these Netflix series because the world is so much more accepting now, even though, people are starting to wake up. It's like their eyes aren't even open yet. It's not this paradise. And, even I, as a millennial, look at Generation Z and think, wow, their generation is so much more accepting, just without even thinking about it, and it's easy for me to say because I'm not a part of that generation, and because my generation, the one before, has been the one who has made it so they can be that accepting, and I think there's a lot of gatekeeping within the disability community that's just, it's almost hypocritical, because we all know what it's like for us to face these gatekeepers of, the entertainment industry and just, life in general, because the systems were not built for us or to benefit us, so we all know what that feels like, and yet we do it to each other because, for whatever reason, because we want to feel a part of something, we want to have an identity. I don't know, we've all engaged in it, but it's something that we need to actively think about when we speak about the community and about our own disabilities, because there's always a trade-off. Like when I was being bullied, my doctors would say, I can give you a mobility aid or something like that, so that people will be able to physically see that you are disabled. And so they'll leave you alone, and stop saying that you're faking or that you just want attention. So there is always a trade-off. There is no disability that is better or easier than another one. We are all on the same level, and just as we are on the same level with each other, we should be on the same level with people who are not disabled. It's not that I would ever say that I have more to bring to the table to someone who doesn't have a disability, because where, I am marginalized in one area, they might be marginalized in an area that I am not. And so I wouldn't ever say, well, I have more to bring to the table because I'm literally in pain every single day, you know, and I've gone through so much. And so my life experience is more somehow. I would say that our life experience is at least equal to everybody else's. It's equal, but it's different. And those differences need to be seen and acknowledged and also valued.
Yeah, it's getting the world to recognize that we're at least equal. Like that's I think what we're working on is like trying to get people to get to baseline of we are human beings who can be, you know, a whole multitude of identities that any other human being would have and be. And we can be parents, and we can be sexy, and we can be good at our jobs, and we can be bad at our jobs, and we can be terrible people, and we can be wonderful people. And those are the things we're not given the opportunity to do. We're only allowed to be disabled.
Yeah,
and that's where the problem is.
We're not these disabled angels who can do no wrong, but we're not these people to be pitied either, or these, you know, villains like that movie Split, you know, makes us out to be. And thinking that there's this paradox that we have to uphold instead of just being allowed to be human. We're always, you know, a disabled person who happens to be a human instead of a human who happens to be disabled. And, you know, in all these movies that include disability, the disabled person often dies before the end and is only there as some sort of life lesson for the main character who isn't disabled, you know, like The Fault in Our Stars, everything like that. You know, it's just, it's the same with other marginalized communities, like Eddie Redmayne, who played, you know, Stephen Hawking. He also played a transitioning person in The Danish Girl. And it's like, again, it was Oscar bait, like, oh, so hard, something that a regular person doesn't have to deal with, so complex, you know. And it's these movies are being made for the benefit of people without disabilities so that they can feel better about themselves. And I, you know, again, I can only think of that movie Unrest by Jen Brea, who was made by a disabled person who was actually made for the benefit of disabled people. I really cannot think of another movie that showcases disability where it was made for disabled people, and that's a huge problem. I mean, imagine going through your whole life, however old you are, and never ever seeing yourself on screen. Like I said last week, it took me 25 years, and still I only have that one instance. I doubt I'll see it again anytime soon, and if I do, it's going to be some very small indie thing that will not garner any attention. You know,
Yeah,
it will not be equal.
We were talking about, I mean, like, representation matters so much. And I think that I recently found that the slogan, "Nothing about us without us," which came from disabled community. Like, you'd think that was like, you know, oh, this is, I don't even know, like MLK, whatever. It came from disabled community. Such a powerful statement. Nothing about us without us. There you go. Like, you don't need to even go much further than that. I know, Diana, you were trying to say something. I didn't.
I'll say it because I know we're short for time. I want my disability to be visible. I want disability to be visible, and I want experiences of the disabled community to be visible. There's so many stories of disability history that we do. Crip Camp is a perfect example of what I mean by that. But we have the 504 protest. We have so many historical things that we don't know, historical figures that we don't know about, like Judy Heumann, like we just read about Luther King and Harriet Tubman and the Stonewall riots. And we need to know those. There's so many stories about our history that are not visible, but that need to be, because it's a part of our history, but also in the disability needs to be visible in the human story. I mean, right now, like 2 feet away, my nephew is like sitting right over there. That's a human that's playing a video game and looking at me like, why are you talking about me right now? You know, but it's because this is my human experience too. So I think in the human experience, disability needs to be a visible part of the everyday human experience that people who are mourning, and like they we mourn, we grieve, we make people laugh, we have jokes, we have whatever, and disability needs to be just the intersection part and visible and the intersection of diverse human experiences that we all have. So you have an ensemble on TV that looks the way our society looks. And if we are truly going to reflect society, if we are 20% of the population, we would be visible in a lot more of the shows than we are visible right now. If we take more accurate portrayals. So those are the two things. Our stories, we need more stories to be visible, and we need to be visible in the story of the human experience.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you said that. And I also wanted to point out, you talking about your nephew actually made me think of a point. When my grandfather on my dad's side, he had skin cancer, and he lost his nose at one point throughout his time, and he had to feed through a tube and all of this stuff for the rest of his life. And I will never forget the one time that he had to wear bandages to cover up the fact that he didn't have a nose. My baby brother, who was maybe like 2 at the time, every time he saw my grandfather would say, "Oh, Papa's got a boo-boo." Like, it was never anything, like, he never really treated my grandfather different because of the way his like face looked. And I think that with kids, and I want to say, like, think like a kid, because kids are in this wide world of like amazement and wonderment, but they don't care what people look like or sound like or are like. They just want to enjoy the company. They want to enjoy the companionship, the friendship. So I almost feel like thinking like a kid in that way. They're curious, but they're not pushing people away. They want to embrace everyone they encounter. So I almost feel like thinking in that childlike wonder is really great, because you're not pushing anyone away. You're bringing everyone towards you. And I will never forget that, what my brother did with my grandfather. My grandfather thought it was cute and funny, and it was basically telling a 2-year-old about skin cancer. And I think that in the way of telling a 2-year-old without freaking a 2-year-old out. But it was, right before I was diagnosed. So, my brother was dealing with partial blindness, and my grandfather was skin cancer, like all these different things as a young kid growing up. And so it was like one of these things where, as a kid, we would tell him, Spencer can't see. Papa doesn't have a nose, but he would never treat us any differently. And he was like 3. So I think thinking like that is a really great way to do this. We're going to wrap up. I want to thank all the panelists for coming. I do want to say that Jen does a lot in the tabletop community for tabletop gaming. So there's a doc that we shared last week, but we're going to share it again in this one as well for some accessibility needs. And so I think that that's something to just consider, since a lot of stuff is virtual and online right now. There's a lot of accessibility needs that are different than in person. I know, as someone with a visual impairment, a lot of screen staring at the screen a lot all day is really, really draining, probably more than fully sighted individuals. It's a lot. And I've learned the beauty of the the blue light. I've learned the beauty of the blue light lately, and inverting text, so it's like a dark background with white text. It helps when I'm on the computer constantly. So if you're doing projects, like you're doing online shows or you're doing online things, consider having easily accessible materials for people without the need for people to actually tell you they need it. Just be like, oh, if there's a document, let me have it in a docx format and a PDF format. So someone in a docx can make the text bigger, or they can change the text to something that they can actually see. Maybe consider having a captioning service or an interpreter if you have access to that. So people who need those services are able to do it without having to ask or having to do all the extra research to figure it out.
I have in the document, I have a number of links to services, including free services for captioning, as well as a bunch of different resources in terms of websites, different tools you can use. There's not just gaming material in there. There's also basically a lot of Disability 101 and other resources. One other thing, which is not, I don't think, mentioned in the document, but I think is an important thing, is if you're doing Zooms, normalize the idea that people don't have to be on screen. They can turn off their windows. for a lot of people, it's really exhausting to see themselves or even to see other people. A lot of face work for people can be really exhausting. So normalizing that is a big deal. Also for trans folks, it's really important for dysphoria to not have to always look at themselves. There's a whole bunch of other resources out there talking specifically about being on Zoom calls and kind of the fatigue that comes with that, and so on and so forth. So there's a bunch of material out there.
I'm glad you included those materials. And this also harkens on the idea of, like, if you want to ask me about disability, I have no problem answering questions, but there's also myriad resources that take a quick Google or take a quick call or something, that instead of me explaining everything and exerting all of my energy, I can be like, here's 3 places to go look. Or, start with ADA, American with Disabilities Association, or ACT. Oh, geez. I'm like losing all my words today. But the ADA, look at that first and see what accessibility things they say, what's a reasonable accommodation, all these things. And they have a bunch of resources too that they can offer for you to take a look at, to do education. So it's
kind
not
of conversations in good faith. Do your homework first. So when we're having the conversation, we can actually discuss information instead of having to just talk at you and try and do an info dump. Do the homework and then come in ready to have a real conversation about it. I think that's why I made the document in the first place, was to have a shortcut for the conversations that I have over and over. It's a way to save energy, which is something that is at a premium with a lot of disabilities. So
thank you for doing that as well. Thank you for sharing those resources as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. I am so blown away by the vulnerability that was expressed tonight. I am so thankful for all of you coming and sharing a piece of yourself. I'm trying to figure out in my head a way to keep this going, like for forever, and y'all are like, no. But I love hearing all of you. Going back and forth with Lorna Silva, who's a producer on the show now, and I really appreciate that. It's so exciting. But we're talking about how much of like how you're all powerhouses, how you all have this amazing voice, and it's just brilliant to watch. So thank you so much for sharing yourself and being here with us. And you didn't have to, so I really appreciate it. And just even knowing that, a part of it is just trying to prove who you are. Like, why are we trying to prove the pain that we go through? Why would you have to do that? Why would you have to prove who you are? And, on a totally different level, but Diana, I know that you could probably relate to being Black enough. Like, how am I not Black enough and I'm Black? How can you be, I'm Black, you know what I mean? And everything that associated with being Black, like if you said, these are like, this person isn't Black enough, you're like, but I bet in the world they're treated as Black enough, so they are Black enough.
Bro, that's a whole nother 5-hour show, baby.
I'm just trying to say.
I'm back on that joke too, and I have a lot to say.
It's true, and it's something we've battled throughout the years. If we weren't disabled enough, or if you were walking, and people were really mean about it in there.
It's just to have this lens, and especially in the industry, because I feel so culpable sometimes, because we are the storytellers in this industry that tell people how to view the world. And especially here in the United States, we tell you how you're supposed to view the world. And if we're not fighting these fights, then we are culpable for what's out there. So it's not necessarily a situation where we are able to say, well, I might jump into this or I might not. It's you have to, or else you are responsible for this. You have the blood on your hands about what comes from this. For those little kids that don't feel like they can love themselves or know themselves or even see them.
There are literal life and death consequences to whether or not we see disabled people as people. I mean, if you
Yeah.
look at what's happening and people being denied ventilators, there was a
Exactly.
man in Texas who died because he was a quad and they decided his life was not worth living and had no value. And that is because we do not tell stories of how disabled lives have value. There is this direct correlation between how we humanize people in stories and
Yes.
whether or not we see them as human in real
Yes.
life. And it's so important. And that's
Exactly.
why we all are fighting so hard for this and feel so passionately about
Yes.
this.
Yep. Yep.
Exactly. Exactly. Right. I've been in that position where my life was literally, I almost lost my life several times because my only way to get health insurance before, when there was a pre-existing condition thing, was to make it through a big group like Screen Actors Guild. And when I was going through my cancer stuff, it really made me the fighter that I am, because literally I was going to lose my life if I lost my health insurance. And I did lose it many times, because literally losing jobs because people figured out that I was limping and being put in a position of having to hide it. And then also the disabled community treating me as if I wasn't a part of their community. So I didn't fit in anywhere because I wasn't perfect enough to be in that community. And then I was literally, that's how I was treated. That's how I was treated. I didn't like it, but it's how I was treated. You don't fit in because you're not in this perfect crowd. And then the disabled community was like, well, you're walking, so you don't fit into our crowd. And it was a horrible place to be. And I literally was fighting for my life. So she's a honor that what she just said is that literally lives are on the line. And what I'm grateful to for this community is that, or this panel and everyone who is speaking up, is that if we could just get to a place in life where we honored everyone's life experience, where they're at, what their disability is, whatever they are, if we could just treat each person like a valued individual, that would be
Yes.
a beautiful thing.
And let us get past the concept of having to fight to be human.
Yeah.
That
Or to work, or to be heard, or to make your health insurance, or to
Right.
be valued. We shouldn't have to fight our whole lives.
and understand that it's not always just us fighting to be seen or to be heard. There is a force fighting against that too, for the comfort of whatever is out there right now. And there are, if you're comfortable in this environment, then you might be part of the problem. That's just something to think about. If you're comfortable and you are fighting or pushing against any type of movement of change, you might be part of what the pain is.
Mhm.
If you're,
Yeah, and
if,
to
if,
get some more perspective, something that has really been difficult for me, this calendar year is people, who are saying like, oh, I have a weak immune system, and they don't, they just get an infection or the flu every year like the average person without disability does. And they're saying this and sort of fear-mongering with the pandemic. And it bothers me because if you and I both get COVID and we both need a ventilator, you're the one that's going to get it, not me. So do not, like, I am so annoyed with people going around saying, like, making up some sort of excuse about how they're high risk when they medically are not. Because it also, they're like, when I was younger, one of the things that I was bullied for because people didn't understand my disabilities was, well, you're only sick when it's convenient. But then able-bodied people go around and do this, and it's so disrespectful to me and so maddening. And another thing, is like, we have been asking for all of these accommodations, these work from home accommodations for decades, and it has only now been realized because able-bodied people need that accommodation, and we have been told throughout our entire lives that no, it's not possible. You can't just work from home. We can't do that for you. We can't make an exception.
Right.
We can't.
right.
The reality has always been they can, they just don't want to. It's too inconvenient, and they don't value us enough as a worker or as a person to give us an accommodation to put us on that equal playing field, because it is a reasonable accommodation. And that is largely why I am on, government disability, is because some days, I cannot get out of bed. Like some days I have a migraine all day and can't even open my eyes, and so I am on disability because those accommodations are not and were not available to me. And so I think, especially when it comes to the pandemic, people without disabilities really need to, check themselves sometimes, because like you think that this is really lonely, being isolated. This is how I've lived my life.
Right.
For the majority of my life, think about for the people where this living situation won't end when the pandemic is over, I think it would be nice to have some greater appreciation, or at least to have these people be self-aware, and a lot of times they aren't. And I know that to people without disabilities, I'm probably coming off as this like angry, spiteful, disabled person, but that's just
let them think what they think. You know what I mean?
If you think that, if you're uncomfortable, then it's probably because you are not educated enough in this area. I'm not going to censor myself to comfort your ignorance, because there comes a point where it is very much life and death, and this is part of it. This is really part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you ever think that there would be a time that they would say it's okay to do comedy from home? Like you can do a comedy show from home. No,
I know.
Now the money depends on it. Yeah, we can make it work.
A lot of diversity is only happening for the sake of a company getting good press. They don't really care about diversity. It's only because their hand has been forced and they have to do it, or because they know there will be social backlash if they don't appear to be doing it.
Yeah.
And for, the people who are part of marginalized communities who are screwed over when it comes to diversity, it's just like, great, I'm going to be somebody else's token disabled person.
Yeah.
And, all this comes down to just actually valuing the lives of disabled people as full entire humans, and not as, oh well, they'll help the company look better, or we have to hire them because of this, or to meet this quota or whatever, or we can't hire them because allowing them to work from home wouldn't be fair, or wouldn't be difficult, or would be too difficult, when one, giving us reasonable accommodations is fair. And two, everybody knows now it's not difficult. So I am really hoping that the way that we look at illness and disability during and after this will evolve and change, especially because more people will become disabled after this, people who develop post-viral syndromes. And, it's one of those things where a lot of people don't understand it until it affects them or somebody they care about. And now that pool of people is expanding greatly. So hopefully some good can come of it when it comes to research and awareness and inclusion.
Yeah. This has been a great equalizer in some ways. I won't even say great. Let's actually just forget everything I just said. What I want to do, though, is just we're going to give you everyone's social media information, so that you can have these discussions with these wonderful people, and because these are discussions that they want to have. These are discussions that need to be had. So please reach out. Please keep this discussion going. Please don't let it die just from tonight. And I'm sure it won't. With these powerhouses, it definitely won't. I want to thank Spencer so much for doing this. I know we said we were going to do an hour. We go further than an hour. We should have said we are only going to do 3 hours, and then we only do.
I know. I kept you guys a whole almost hour longer than I started. Thank you, Allie. Thank you, Eileen. Thank you, Diana. And thank you. I couldn't be here tonight, but was here last week. Great perspective as well. I just said great. gave some great, I don't know, my words tonight have been all over the
What's happening in Spencer?
great perspective. I said great from great, which is not at all what I meant.
And then you just burst and turn into little men that run away. That's my answer.
And thank you, Mirage, for giving us this opportunity to. The discussion is so important, and I love that it's multi-generational, and I love that everybody's feels safe to say everything they want to say because it helps all of us. It's all learning, and it's so wonderful. Thank you.
And Diana, I think there's something you want to say.
Yeah, no, I just want to thank everyone, and also the Facebook user that I was in their picture and profile to say, let me know who you are on private messaging, because I will never get to sleep tonight if I don't know who you are. You have to say on private messaging, it was me, so I can say, oh, Papa, hello, because I really do want to get some rest tonight, and I won't because I'll be pacing the phone. Who was that? Who was that?
I guess it was MJ.
MJ, okay. Oh, no, also just thank you for the opportunity. It's always great to be on a panel with powerful women. To Amy Allison, who I'm getting to know, and Eileen and Jennifer, you guys know I love you both dearly. And,
Me too.
you know,
Love you too.
Wonderful. So, Allison, you are the next generation, part of the newer generation. Welcome, honey.
Yes, welcome to the battle. We love you for being here.
Yeah, and Mirage and Spencer, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I just want to point out again, I've told them all this again. I'm just really excited that I'm the only white male on this panel. I'm excited about it because also it just goes to show like how diverse. I mean, there's like 6 of us right now on camera. How diverse this community is.
Exactly.
The minimum amount of people that we have on this panel right now. And so I just think it's wonderful. But I also, it just tickles me a lot. I don't know why.
Oh, you're not the only one that's happy about that.
We're so thrilled there's so many women because Diana and I've talked about this many years. They would only have the men with disabilities on the panel, never the women. Like the women couldn't show up with a disability. Like really? So I'm just thrilled to see so many women.
I just comment on a panel I did objecting to the fact that there were no men on it.
Oh, really? Wow.
Whoa.
It used to be the other way.
Yeah.
And I'm excited about you guys. And I'm sorry we haven't met before, Jennifer and Allison and Spencer and Mirage. But I'm so grateful you guys are here. And I'm sorry I keep saying about your youth, but I'm grateful for your youth because I'm exhausted. I feel like I've been in this battle for so long and I really want you guys coming in and just run with it. I'm so tired.
I learned from the leaders. I mean, it's the idea of like, I did the Access Acting Academy workshop in January where I met Jen and Christine and everyone. And what I didn't realize was advocacy is a thing. And like, oh, what? This whole time I've been advocating for myself and I didn't realize that I was advocating where it's like, I can take my glasses off on set, but I have to have them nearby, or like I can only take them off when I'm getting ready to film. It just makes me dizzy and this and that and whatever I can't see. And I didn't realize all this. So now I was like, now that I know this, I can start, as I'm about to turn 30, I can like figure this out and be like, I've got so much time left in me to spread the word of advocacy.
Yeah. And you know, I think a great thing is that people can know that they can speak up, like they can see something and they can speak up and they can say, you know, even if it's something that makes them feel bad about something that they're dealing with, speak up, please. Like we need your voice. It's tiring. Like I can say, it's tiring. We don't always want to be the ones that are like saying, hey, I want to do some comedy sometimes. I want to have some fun. Everybody wants to have that normalcy, but you know, we don't get to. So speak up, support, all of that. So that we'll wrap up. And I just wanted to thank everybody. My heart is full. I've been feeling horribly this week, and y'all always get me. So thank you. You got me again. This panel got me again. Before we leave, I have my my outro now. This is the second week, and it's I believe you, I see you, and I accept you. All right. Well, now we're going to wave awkwardly until I click on the end broadcast. Remember, next week, 7 o'clock, we have another panel. So please, 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 please look for all of that information on all of my social media. And Lorna Silva is our new producer. Keep waving. All right. Bye.